I'm Bradley. I'm feeling good.
Okay, and what's your pre-show ritual?
I listened to the same 4 songs. Already ticked those off. Feeling good. It is Hard to Handle by the Black Crowes. Here I Go Again by Whitesnake. Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard. And When You Were Young, The Killers.
Wow.
It's 4 pretty douchey songs, but it makes me feel good.
We love to make you laugh. You're very, really with all the jokes we have. You're very, really funny. That's why we do what we do. You're very, really we funny. Love to make you laugh. You're very, really Vancouver, funny. We love your laugh. It's YVR Funny.
Welcome to the stage, Bradley Fung!
Hello, everybody. How are we doing tonight? Nice to see everyone. Happy Movember. Been working on this bad boy for a while now. I've tried before. Didn't shave for an entire month. Couldn't get anything going. My upper lip looked like the side of a mountain after an avalanche. Like only 3 trees are left standing, but now they're all bent and growing in different directions. A little bit more about me. I'm Asian. Surprise. There's been a lot of Asian hate going on lately. I was walking down the street, and a man yelled at me, "Hey, if only some of you would go back to the Philippines." Now, I'm Chinese, but I wasn't mad that he got my 23andMe wrong. That's fine. Like, my issue was that he only wanted some of us to go back, like he's a progressive racist. Like, I don't like racism, but if there's one thing I will not tolerate, it's a lack of conviction. Commit, you know? As a result of this hate, lots of people are championing Asian culture, but that can go too far as well. Like, I don't want to see Chinese food described as a mystical, ancient, exotic dish. Like, we're not wizards, you know? Like, you put fat on anything, it'll taste good. I do think we do have the best food, though. If you need any proof, all you need to do is look at a picture of Buddha next to a picture of Jesus, and you tell me who was eating better. like who had barbecue pork and who was stuck with communion wafers is all I'm saying. My favorite place to eat is a Chinese seafood restaurant because you get to go out to eat, but you also get to go to the zoo. And those live tanks full of endangered species, it's a wondrous experience. Like, at some places, they'll even bring the individual animal to your table for you to inspect, and that's always a fun moment when you get to organize a murder with your family. But I think with people concerned about where their food comes from, they should have to do this at all restaurants. Like, if you go to the Keg, the waiter should have to drag out a cow and be like, "Hey, folks, before we start carving up this steak, who can I interest in a milkshake? We just gotta know now." Another big difference between Asian restaurants, white restaurants, very different types of customer service. Like, waiters at a white restaurant have an energy that belongs inside of a mascot costume. Like, you know, they'll just like skip up to your table, give my grandma a noogie. They'll be like, "Hey friends, how's it going? My name's Ricardo and I'll be helping us out today." I'm like, did Ricardo say us? Because I don't see enough seats at this table for him. This would never happen at an Asian restaurant, of course. They are not allowed to sit down. I'm not vegan. I don't agree with the argument that humans are supposed to be vegan. On the contrary, I think murdering is in our nature as a people. Like, if I see a great concert, I'll tell my friends. I'd be like, "Damn, what a show. They killed. They crushed. They slayed it up there." I have never gone up to someone and said, "Damn, what a show. They harvested. They planted. They gathered so hard up there." This has never happened. I'm on Instagram. I saw this hashtag. It was #ExploreBC. But when I looked at the pictures the hashtag was used in, I was like, these people aren't explorers at all. Like, doing the grouse grind is as much of an exploration as growing your bangs out makes you a whole new you. You're the same thing. Like, I'm a real explorer. I've been places few people have been before. I've been to the end of Tinder. Anyone else make this journey? You're just swiping along the no more faces. Just a pop-up that says there are no more people available in your area. I was perplexed, because when I'm trawling the internet late at night, I am bombarded with messages that say 20 local singles looking to meet, you know. I think they might be lying. I don't know, I'm just not a romantic guy. Like, I want them to change the messages on the heart-shaped candy they give out on Valentine's Day. I got some ideas for some updates. Like instead of putting soulmate, we can put, you kind of look like my ex and hey, I'm feeling sad. Instead of putting you complete me, we can put your half completes our rent. And finally, instead of you're mine, you'll do. I think if it's good enough for marriage, it's good enough for candy. I was bear sprayed this summer for the first time. Unrelated, but I was bear sprayed for the summer for the first time. Not doing anything noble. I was walking down the street, and a guy walked up to another guy, got him, and I thought they were giving out cologne samples, so I just kind of waltzed right in. And I know racial stereotypes would suggest that someone who looks like me would have a natural defense against attacks to the eye, but I'm here to say that I'm just like the rest of us. Couldn't see a thing when it hit me. I felt like Stevie Wonder during an eclipse. And the first thing I did was call the cops. And I'm not the biggest fan of cops. Like, I don't know how to solve all the problems we've been having, but I look at cops the same way I look at the dresser I built from IKEA. Like, I'm no expert, but I know there are fundamental issues with what's going on over here. But I called them, and their first instruction was to describe the two men. Now, like I said, I don't like stereotyping. I think that's generally a good way to live. Not as helpful when you have to describe two people who stink of booze and who are out of their mind. Like here's how that phone call went. I was like, officer, yeah, it was two white men. How were they dressed? Oh, they were dressed the best they could afford in the current housing market. One was on foot and one was on a bike. More importantly, officer, both were traveling sustainably. Identifying features, well, if he had bear spray, we can assume he likes to camp, and I think both were organ donors, officer. I was crying, but he had kind eyes. Thank you. That's a piece of theater. That's the story of one of the 2 times in my life I've gotten in a fight. Can I share the other time? Thank you. Going to anyway. I was 16. I was at this backyard barbecue, and it's one of those parties where the booze was flowing, the iPod shuffle was shuffling, and the guys are showing way more skin than the girls. Like, you ever see a man's tank top so thin that with his nipples it looks like he's wearing a division sign? Because that's the energy we're dealing with. I'm at this party. I'm drinking my orange and pomegranate cooler because real men are refreshed. When this big guy walks up to me, he goes, hey, I don't know you, I don't like you, time to leave. And he gets right up in my face, so close I can smell his breath. And I'll be damned if it didn't smell like orange and pomegranate. But as the guy, I go to cheers my new friend, he knocks my beer to the ground, pushes me up against the fence, and is ready to fight. And I'm a big UFC fan, but I'll admit, in that moment, I panicked. Time stood still. The only thing I could hear is the soft hum of My Humps by the Black Eyed Peas on the radio. I couldn't remember any of the techniques, any of the fights I've ever saw. The only thing I could remember is my favorite fighters are the ones who fought with heart, the ones who fought with passion. And that's why I thought it was a good idea to start making out with this man. Like, I know some of you think you're bold for experimenting with your lifestyles or your travel, but how many of you have experimented with your sexuality to the sweet dulcet tones of Will I Am? I am. He dropped me to the ground and wiped his mouth in disgust, which I thought was weird because his mouth taste was definitely the same as my mouth taste. All I'm saying is I hope you all have a good night tonight, but if not, I'm 1-1 in street fights. Thanks so much.
I like the individuality of it. I like that if I do well, it's because I wrote it well, I performed it well, I planned it well. I also like that if it doesn't go well, it's because I didn't write it well, I didn't plan it well, I didn't perform it well. So that kind of instant feedback is what I really enjoy. My least favorite part of stand-up are the talkers. When someone chooses to leave their house, pay money, come to a show, and act like they're at home. I think it's worse than heckling. At least a heckler is somewhat engaged, I think. But if you're just talking the whole time, you can stay home. I I think people don't realize that, at least for me, the amount of time it goes into it. So, you know, coming up with the idea, working on it, all those bus rides in the rain, all those shower thoughts when you were kind of reviewing shows, all the late night ideas when you wake up and put something in your phone, kind of all of that to get a one-liner. A lot of times, I think people don't kind of realize the time that goes into it. I know tons of comics who, you know, can come up with things off the cuff. I'm just not that type of person. So at least for me, I feel like it takes me a lot longer to get something that works, and people might not know that. Locally, some of my favorite comics are Nathan Hare, one of my favorite comics, totally different styles. I think if I tried to do what he did, it would not work. Julie Kim was one of the first pro comics who was so just incredibly warm and kind to me when I was green and starting out. And I think the last one I'll mention is Charlie Demers. He was my professor at UBC. I took a creative writing for a comedic forms class. That was kind of the first time I tried writing jokes. And so he's been always someone I've looked up to in the local scene for sure. I don't think I watched a lot of stand-up when I was growing up. I think that for me, I grew up when YouTube was getting big, so I think a lot of my stand-up, a lot of the ways I digested stand-up was through YouTube. I didn't have the Comedy Channel or anything like that, so a lot of full specials in clips that did not make sense or cohesively go together. I think that was my stand-up experience growing up. Just a lot of random YouTube clips being sent to me on Facebook and MSN Messenger, and yeah. The first time I did stand-up, it was a show I had no business being on. It was a show full of touring pros. It was while I was studying at UBC, and I happened to know the folks putting on the show, and they were nice enough to put me on. I was definitely so incredibly green, so incredibly nervous. I still have the cue card where I wrote down my notes for that first show, and before this I looked at it to try to remember the jokes. I can't remember 95% of what those bullet points were. I think the only one I remember is, it was about when a guy has too much to drink and trying to perform is like trying to pick a lock with a slinky. I don't think I was particularly confident when I started. I think I was an actor when I was younger. That's what I was studying to do. And when I stopped doing that, I missed having a creative outlet, a way to perform. So I think that I was just bored enough and had enough kind of creative drive, I guess, to give it a shot. I knew that if it didn't work out, it would be okay, but luckily it's worked out so far, I guess. I don't think I ever got any bad advice from anyone. I think everyone was very kind and inviting to me. I think I was really early on, I was trying a new joke, and to be fair, it was a gross joke, and a woman in the front row went, "That's just terrible." So I don't really do that joke anymore. But yeah, that's the only piece of advice I can remember. I think if you want to try, my biggest piece of advice is to always just keep cutting. The first version of a joke, whenever I write it, is always probably 10 times longer than what it ends up being. I'll try stuff with my friends, but that 5-minute conversation I have with my friends is probably really only 20 seconds, 30 seconds of a joke that I'm happy with. So I think always being critical and always trying to make it the best it can be would be my biggest piece. Yeah, so when I come up with a new idea, I have this, notes app on my phone, and I just dump every premise that I can think of into that, and then every once in a while I'll sit down and try to flesh them out into something, and then once the general idea is there, just trying it out and always cutting and always trying to make it as refined as it can be. I'm certainly not one of the folks who writes every day. I know people who write every day, and that's so impressive to me. I don't have the drive or energy to do that. But yeah, just always trying to refine something is something I'm always aware of. I think, when I'm writing. I think being present is something that took me a long time to even be aware of, and I'm certainly still getting better at it. I think that it took me a long time to realize that this wasn't a book reading of this crafted thing that I worked so hard on and picking all the right words for. So I think kind of being present with the audience, ready to pivot, ready to change, ready to throw something away, ready to add something, is something that I'm still very much getting better at and trying to be more present during. I think that when I was newer, certainly I went in and I was like, I'm going to share this baby that I worked so hard on, and you're going to enjoy this baby because it's perfect. Whereas now I'm much more humble and aware that it might not be perfect. I will alter my sets based on the audience, kind of going into it, based on what I think that the audience might like. I certainly will do a different show in Vancouver than I did in Edmonton. The one time I did a show in Edmonton, I learned that they don't want to hear the same stuff that they might want to hear here. I think that being ready to pivot and change if the audience isn't going with what I set out to do is important, because at the end of the day, it's about their enjoyment, not just mine. But on the flip side, I think that I'm also being better at sticking to what I think will work as well, and not going for, the easy stuff all the time. I think that it's a balance of, pleasing the audience, but also doing what I wanted to do from the beginning. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make people laugh. So I think if that's the end result, then whatever we take to get there is a good idea. I don't think any of my jokes are finished for me. I think my jokes reach a point where I'm happy with them, but they can change at any point if I think of a new angle, if I hear a new word, if I find that audiences aren't reacting in the same way that they once were when I tried it. I don't think my jokes are ever finished, but that just might be my own self-doubt. I think that I've been quite fortunate in the last couple of years to be booked more consistently, so I don't always have to go with my A+ work that I know works all the time and I know will work in most scenarios. I think that showrunners giving me the opportunity to perform more often has allowed me to take more risks in terms of my comedy and try new things and try different angles and not always go for the low-hanging fruit. I think that it's been certainly a privilege to be busy with comedy, and I think that it's allowed me to take more risks as well. I've really enjoyed seeing the increase in diverse lineups in the last couple of years. I mean, I haven't been in comedy for that long, but certainly seeing the increase in diversity and representation on the lineups, and not just representation, but representation of really funny people. Because I think that's important, that representation isn't just for the sake of doing it. I think it's giving opportunities to people who genuinely are really funny is something that's really important. I think that's something that's been really nice to see. Certainly when I started being so new, I feel like the community has also grown quite a bit since I started. And I think Vancouver kind of doesn't always get the best rep when it comes to comedy, with people, they'll start in Vancouver and they'll leave to go somewhere else. And certainly part of that is maybe due to opportunities, but I think the community has grown a lot around here as well. I'm a sucker for a variety show. I love seeing different styles of entertainment and different styles of art come together. I'm very aware it does not always work. I totally recognize that no one likes to be surprised by comedy. Like, whenever I go to a show and they're surprised that comedy is happening, it never works, it's always bad. You can go to a restaurant and there's a piano player and you're like, perfect. Like, I love live music, but if you go out to eat and there's comedy and you didn't know there was gonna be comedy, it's horrible. So I totally recognize that it's not for everyone and it doesn't always work, but I think having shows where people get to showcase different forms of art and different forms of entertainment, that'd be really cool for me. I don't want to run it, but I'd like it to be a thing. Yeah, so when the pandemic started, I know so many comics who were writing every day, putting out sketch material, putting out videos, putting out different forms of comedy. I did none. I took it completely off. I had no desire to kind of do comedy if it wasn't for a live audience. So I came out very hungry and very excited for comedy to be back. And I think, for me at least, the audiences coming out of the pandemic were amazing. I feel like people missed it. I feel like people needed it. And they were so warm and excited. And that was really nice to come out of the pandemic and have those audiences for the first few shows back, because I mean, I was certainly rusty. I can't speak for other people, but I know my first couple shows were a little iffy. I think it went well. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but in my head, I think it went well. I'm always a little nervous to go bullet if I'm being honest, but also very flattering to be trusted to go first. I think that, you know, the person who goes first has a lot of responsibility to kind of engage the crowd, get them going, and I think that I did that. I hope that I did that. Overall, it was just a lovely experience to also do the show with so many other comics that I see all the time and I admire and I think that are really funny. So kind of going through the whole process together was really special for me too.
We love to make you laugh with all the jokes we have. That's why we do what we do. You're why we are funny. Richmond to Surrey, Delta and Deep Cove. We love to make you laugh. We love to make you laugh. We love to make you laugh. Vancouver, we love your laugh. It's YVR Funny.